Today we will be doing a science experiment on gases in our atmosphere. For today's activities, we will be doing some background knowledge where we will be learning about what atmosphere is composed of, and a method that we can use to prove that oxygen is in our atmosphere. We will also discuss the scientific method and do an experiment that determines if oxygen is in our atmosphere. To start off with, the definition for atmosphere is that atmosphere is a layer of gas that surrounds the planet. Our atmosphere is composed of a number of gases. The majority of our atmosphere is nitrogen at 78%. Oxygen is next at 21%, followed by argon, then trace amounts of carbon dioxide, and all other gases. How can we prove that oxygen is in our atmosphere? We can actually prove that oxygen is in our atmosphere by lighting a fire. A fire needs three elements to burn. It needs heat, fuel, and oxygen. Now that we have our background information, let's move on to our experiment. We are going to be using the scientific method during our experiment. The scientific method has 8 major components: the problem, hypothesis, materials, variables, which include manipulated, controlled, and responding, procedure, observation, conclusion, and last, if there are any other questions. The first part of the scientific method is the problem. This is the question the experiment is designed to examine. It must be in the form of a question and a complete sentence. Our problem for today is, will the candle stay lit if it is cut off from our atmosphere? A hypothesis is an educated guess about what will happen or how the problem is solved. It usually is in this format: I think blank because blank. An example of this in our experiment is, I think the candle will go out if it is cut off from the atmosphere because fire needs oxygen to burn. Next, we need to go over the materials. Materials are what is needed for the experiment. It's usually listed in point form with exact amounts. We are going to need 3 tea candles, 2 small glass cups, 1 lighter, 1 eraser, and 1 stopwatch. Next, we have to think about the variables in our experiment. There are 3 main variables in the scientific method: the manipulated variable, controlled variable, and responding. The manipulated variable is the variable that you change during the experiment. For our experiment, it is how much air the candle is exposed to. The controlled variable is what things you try to keep the same for each trial of the experiment. For our experiment, it would be the type of candle, the source of the heat being the lighter, and the timer being used. There also might be other controlled variables that I have not spoken about. The responding variable is what will change or happen because of the manipulated variable. So we are hoping to see a difference in the amount of time that the candle stays lit. The next step in the scientific method is the procedure. We will start off by lighting all 3 candles with a lighter. We are going to wait till all candles are burning bright and are fully lit. We will then put 2 glasses over the candles. One should completely seal off the air, and the other should be propped up on an eraser to allow some air in. We are going to time the experiment with a timer and record the time it took for the candle to go out. We are going to wait a minute maximum for the candles to go out. Now let's watch the experiment. We are going to start off by lighting each of the candles. and making sure that they are brightly lit. If you are doing this at home, make sure that you ask for permission first and that you know how to safely use a lighter without burning your hand. The next thing I'm going to do is to place the glasses on each of the candles, and then I'm going to start my timer. I'm going to record the results and make sure that I know when each of the candles go out. As you can see, the one closed off from oxygen has already went out, and the one with limited oxygen is slowly fading away. Oh, and it looks like it has went out too. Well, as the one with the unlimited oxygen stays lit. While we are watching the experiment, it was important for us to record our observations. Our observations are the results that described what happened in our experiment. You will only describe facts, and you don't try to explain why in the observation section. There are many ways to record data for our observations, including creating a chart or a graph, writing a written description, including a picture, drawing, or diagram, or using your 5 senses to describe what you saw. I felt that the best way to observe our experiment right now is to include a chart with information on how long the candles stayed lit. As you can see, the one closed off from oxygen lasted for 7.23 seconds. The one with limited air lasted 19.08 seconds, and the one with unlimited air did not go out. Finally, we will get on to our conclusion of our experiment. For right here, we describe what happened in our experiment. Was our hypothesis correct or incorrect, and why? What did we learn? We can explain our observations, and will always write in complete sentences. We can also include any other information that you want to discuss and explain. For my conclusion, I wrote that my hypothesis was correct. The candle went out when it was cut off from the atmosphere. By doing the experiment, I learned that the atmosphere contains oxygen and fire uses oxygen when it burns. I discovered this by watching the candle quickly go out when it was placed under the glass cup. Placing the candle under the cup limited the amount of oxygen it received. When the small amount of oxygen was used up, the fire went out, proving my hypothesis. The final part of the scientific method is the question step. During the question step, we can think of the experiment and ask any questions that we are unsure about. We can ask, what can we do next time in another experiment? And we can ask, because of this experiment, is there something else that we want to know? Did it bring up any more questions as it brought up answers? Here is a quick review of what we learned today. We learned that atmosphere is a layer of gas that surrounds the planet, is approximately 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and 1% other gases. We learned that fire requires 3 elements to burn: heat, fuel, and oxygen. We learned about the scientific method and the 8 steps: the problem, hypothesis, materials, variables, procedure, observation, conclusion, and question. We learned that the 3 variables are the manipulated variable, the one thing or aspect in the experiment that you can change, the controlled variable, what things are aspects that will stay the same for every trial of the experiment, and the responding variable is what will change or happen because of the manipulated variable. All right, that's the end of the video. I hope everybody learned something today.